Welcome back, everyone, to a No Mercy Cobra Kai Season 3 watch party. So far, I've talked about most of the other characters in Season 3, but I haven't touched on Kreese yet. Now, as you saw from the thumbnail, Kreese lived through Vietnam and survived 2 fights with Mr. Miyagi, but I don't think he's getting out of Season 3 alive. Let's take a look at how I see his story arc in Season 3 playing out and why I think he will ultimately die. Now, I said in 3 Wars 1 Fight that all the main characters in the show had their lives changed by the events of Season 2. And it's true everyone's life is taking a serious negative turn going into Season 3. That is, everyone except Kreese. Going into Season 3, Kreese has what he wants most. He has the Cobra Kai dojo back and a roster of students. Okay, I'm sure he would have preferred his students to win a few more fights, or any fight, frankly. Losing to Dimitri? Damn it, Hawk, come on. So let's stop and think for a moment. If he's sitting high, what could unsettle him? Well, we know this season will focus heavily on backstory, and that will most certainly include Kreese's experience with Vietnam. The thing about Vietnam is it just wasn't about the war over there. It was about the protests at home. But what do a bunch of smelly hippies protesting a war have to do with Season 3? I'm glad you asked. Remember way back when Ralph Macchio put a pic of his script on Instagram and I made a wonderful video looking into it? Somewhat literally. Well, in that, we were surprised to learn that Moon would be making an early appearance in the first episode of Season 3. Also weird was that she was listed right next to Nestor, the convenience store guy. It's odd. Are they in a scene together, separate? And what the heck are they doing? At the time, I wondered if it was about Moon's party before the big fight. Needless to say, I changed my mind. I now think they're in the scene together. I've pointed out in the Sam videos that Moon abhors all violence and that she will be furious about what happened in school, not to mention how far things escalated. So how would the Cobra Kai flower child react? The way any flower child would. She's gonna get out and protest. I now suspect Moon will be leading students in a protest of the Cobra Kai dojo. Nestor may join in, or maybe he'll tell them to scram as they're scaring customers. Either way, it's on and Moon is serious. This is something we know she cares about. You can even imagine the sort of signs they'll be holding. Stuff like, no violence in our schools, hugs, not kicks, end animal cruelty. Yeah, that too, because of course they would. Hippies, they can never just protest one thing, right? They always have to throw other shit in. Like, you can even imagine them after school so mad about all the fighting, they're gonna protest, but then someone is like, but what about the cute animals? Yeah, they need a voice too. It's so stupid. You know what? It's okay. Hippies are never gonna change. So they're protesting Cobra Kai for all the violence and fighting in school right out front like that. Kreese is on his way out and walks right past. Now ask yourself, where in Kreese's life has he done this before? Just after Vietnam. Kreese is someone who was frustrated he couldn't win in Vietnam, and when he came home, he had scores of hippie protesters saying how horrible he was for what he did. We know Season 3 is going to have a lot of focus on backstory, especially with flashbacks. I believe this is going to happen very, very early in the first episode, except it won't be a flashback to Vietnam jungles, but to the streets of LA with hippies protesting Kreese and furious at him. Now, Moon is upset. She certainly has a right to be. That type of violence should never happen in a school. But what she doesn't know here is her actions aren't going to dissuade Kreese. He's going to be resolved even more. He's going to double down to convince his students not to let those hippies intimidate him. Don't be afraid. In fact, remember this? Cobra Kids on Instagram noted this will very likely be up very early in the season. Kreese will do this to help his students resolve. Ignore the protests. What you're doing is right. Look at what Martin Kove had to say.
He was able to win. He was able to be triumphant, and he was never lost. Then he went, as so many of our boys did, went into Vietnam and wasn't allowed to win. And the bottom line was that he swore he would never lose again.
So right from the starting gate, we have a look at Kreese's Season 3 story arc. His past still impacts his present. He sees what for him are the mistakes of the past and refuses to let them happen again. Never show weakness. Win at all costs. Notice how this immediately plays into what the show does so well. It creates a situation from two different points of view. Moon believes violence should never be tolerated. Kreese believes showing weakness leads to catastrophic consequences. Maybe on some level they're both right. And so Kreese's season goes from there. I expect a lot of what happens to him in the various episodes to have some connection to past events in his life. While we don't know any specifics yet, I do think the big fight in episode 2 will start with Daniel coming after him. Now, I do believe Daniel will be reacting to things that happened to him, his students, and his daughter early in the season. Kreese doesn't like Daniel, so if Daniel is pissed, then he's doing something right. That fight is on. The next part I want to talk about is episode 6. The first 2 seasons had a mid-season climax in episode 5, with the awesome cafeteria fight in season 1 and the not-so-good mall fight in season 2. If we think about the structure for the season, after having a big mid-season climax, episode 6 was a smaller, more personal episode in both seasons. Remember how in season 1 it opened with a young Johnny, only to cut to Johnny here? It's a crowded class but intimate with Johnny. It also gave us an important piece of Johnny's backstory. The same with season 2. This is a small personal story that is also important in terms of history and backstory. We got to see the Cobras back. You also saw Kreese returning Cobra Kai to its original purpose. I think episode 6 of season 3 will be similar. If we are really going to see the foundation of Cobra Kai, I think episode 6 is when it's going to be. The way we had flashbacks to young Johnny, I think we'll have the flashbacks to Vietnam Kreese. Note we could also very likely get a younger Terry Silver here too. Obviously we don't know the context yet, I mean Martin Kove told us so.
They've got backstories of why John Kreese became a bully, which has never been addressed.
Yeah.
And also they go back in Vietnam, and they're going to go back into flashbacks of that.
Note the future tense there. They're going to show flashbacks. Since they didn't do that in season 2, we sure as hell know it's coming in season 3. And keep in mind, he also said this.
I went in with my plan for season 3, and they were there.
They got it. They got it mapped out.
They were there. You know, they knew. I had a great story of how Cobra Kai got its name, and they already were there.
It's worth adding, he also talks about how he met with Army Rangers and had ideas, but the producers already had those plans laid out. So this is all confirmation on our predictions. Flashbacks to Vietnam, origins of Cobra Kai, all of it. Martin Kove gave this interview on Collider in March of last year. I will link it in the description below. So this brings me to my final prediction. Kreese will not make it out of season 3 alive. Somehow he will die. This is a prediction I strongly considered making before season 2 even launched, but have held off until now. The reason I think that comes from Martin Kove himself. Listen to what he says here.
And then they elaborated on what they wanted to do in the future with the character. And they said, you've got to come in episode 10 and set up season 2, and you're a regular in season 2 and 3. And I said,
wait a second, you hear that? Go back.
And then they elaborated on what they wanted to do in the future with the character. And they said, you've got to come in episode 10 and set up season 2, and you're a regular on season 2 and 3.
Then you're a regular on season 2 and 3. Note, he didn't say you're a regular on seasons 2 through 6, or a regular on season 2, 3, and 4. No, they said you're a regular on season 2 and 3. That's it. That is what they asked Martin Kove for way back when they originally met to discuss the show. That's pretty revealing, and we can pretty much assume there was never a plan to have Kreese after season 3. So what happens to Kreese at the end of 3 will be it for his character. Now ask yourself, do you really think after 3 movies and 3 seasons, Kreese's character arc will end with him losing some fight against Johnny and Daniel? Raise your hand. Anyone? Now imagine that meeting the trio had with Martin Kove almost 2.5 years ago. They're pitching the idea to him to get him on board. Do you really think they asked him to be a regular in seasons 2 and 3 and said the plan is for Kreese to lose some fight and leave the valley a forever loser? That'll be the end of your character. Does that sound like something Martin Kove would jump at? That he would be impressed with how well they knew Kreese? He would just end it all as a big loser. I mean, come on, people, come on. Kreese is a winner, and while I think he will die at the end of the season, it will be in a major fight where he is showing no mercy. And by showing no mercy, he is able to save the life of someone else. Now you're probably wondering, who is going to kill Kreese? Even if you believed it was Daniel and Johnny teaming up, what would they do? Double crane kick kill him? No, and neither of them are killers. I'll admit, while I've thought Kreese would die at this end of Season 3 since before Season 2 came out, the biggest gap in the theory was who would be the one to do it. I didn't know. Think through the entire Karate Kid universe. Who out there could be a killer?
Snake, Dennis, Mike Barnes.
No, stop thinking of him. He's not going to be in Season 3.
Now, we fight to death.
Well, he is about the only person who ever had the intention to kill someone, but he's off in Okinawa and has no beef with Kreese. It's not him. So who then? There's not much else. Who else is out there in the storyline that could be capable of actually killing Kreese?
I got married at 18. After I became pregnant with Miguel, I learned the truth about my husband's job. Let's just say he was a very bad man.
Well, there's an interesting answer. But he's in Ecuador. Carmen left him and moved around a lot. What evidence do we have he'll be in Season 3? Well, there's this. This is Rick Perez. Last fall, he was formally announced as joining the cast as a recurring character named Roger. It was mostly the same way Peyton List was announced as a recurring character in Season 2. One interesting difference is literally no character description was given, just his name, Roger. The lack of any description is telling. Even Peyton List got one sentence describing Tori. It makes me think that basically anything they could have said would be revealing too much. That would be the exact situation if he were Miguel's father. They can't really reveal anything other than a name. Now obviously this is going to uproot and change the story trajectory a lot. I'm going to address how I think this will play out for Miguel's story arc in the next video. For now, let's just stick with Kreese. For what it's worth, I don't actually think Roger is going to be the one fighting Kreese. Instead, it's going to be people after him or out for people he cares about. That's how the fight breaks out.
My ex-husband had
On the street.
many
Competition.
enemies.
A man confronts you, he's the enemy. An enemy deserves no mercy. What is the problem, Mr. Lawrence?
The problem here is he's drunk. The problem in the fight is that you have to show no mercy.
These things don't end well. Trust me. I've seen it with my own eyes.
The fight breaks out with a group of drug lords or smugglers. Kreese will show no mercy. Actually, that's something to look forward to. We've seen Kreese the teacher.
The fight isn't over until your enemy is finished. You show your enemy no mercy.
It's high time we see Kreese put it in action. Imagine Kreese in this fight. He knocks a guy down. As the fight rages all around and this drug smuggler scumbag tries to get back up, Kreese rushes him and finishes him off. The Kreese finisher, you could call it. Now after 3 movies and 3 seasons of Kreese talking about no mercy, do you want to see him show it for once? Do you want to see the Kreese finisher? He needs to stop talking about it and start showing it. Listen folks, this is our last chance. I think it's time. Now in 3 Wars, 1 Fight, I said I would later go into detail about the fight in the present day. This is it. Note, if they're fighting basically soldiers of a drug cartel, it keeps the feel of the other 2. Badass karate in an all-out war. If you haven't seen that video yet, be sure to check it out. I'll link it at the end. Now while I think Kreese will somehow die in the end of this fight, we don't know any of the specifics. It could involve Miguel, Daniel, or Johnny. I think Johnny is the most likely. Martin Kove said he thinks Kreese can be redeemed, and if that were to happen, I think it would be with Johnny. So for now, all I can say is this. If halfway or so into the final episode, we end up back here, which is to say here, this parking lot, Johnny and Kreese, lots of bad guys, you know what's coming. And for what it's worth, I can't help but feel like these tweets from Hurwitz and Martin Kove are teasing it. The season will show no mercy because Cobra Kai never dies. Because of course it doesn't. Kreese's teachings will live on forever. I don't think it is an accident. In the meantime, it is worth noting that after word of Kreese's death gets around, that's when Terry Silver shows up. Forget the real story.
Now the real pain begins, Danny boy.
after the trailers come, we will be able to flesh these theories out a little more. We will probably have to wait until the actual release to see for sure how it will happen. Do you think Kreese will die in a massive redemption fight? Do you want to see the Kreese finisher? Let me know in the comments below. Also, subscribe to the channel. As we get to season 3, you don't want to miss anything. More will be coming. In the meantime, check out my video, Kreese is Legend. It's a good one many haven't seen. There's also 3 Wars 1 Fight to understand my take on season 3 and the big end fight. I hope you have a wonderful day. I'll see you again very soon.
I will never let my students lose. Even if they have to learn the hard way. One day you'll thank me for this, Johnny.